We are ready for talk number 3 from John Wilmes and David Scheier. John Wilmes writes about basketballs, their size, texture, and atomic capacities for a living in Chicago. He strives to be a difficult person. And David Scheier is a driver, teacher, and confidant to the exiled in Chicago by way of El Paso, Germany. His hair will be the end of your fears. Together, they will speak about our missing friend, Haywood.
Hello.
John and David.
A word about Haywood. He comes to mind daily. I'm sure for David as well.
Mostly me.
Mostly David, yeah. David doesn't stop thinking about it, really. But I thought about him today. I was in a cab, and there was a song on the radio, and the guy was whistling a completely, directly clashing melody to what was on the radio. And it reminded me of what Haywood said almost right away when we moved in with him. We found him on Craigslist, and the first thing he said was like, "Oh, so you know Craig too?" And I said, "Yeah, okay." And then I was like, "I don't know why we're living with this guy." But he said, "Never tip a cabbie if you don't find him lyrical enough." And then he said, "Second of all, you shouldn't be taking cabs because I can always fly around and get you." And I was like, I didn't quite know what that crazy speech meant, but it turns out that he could fly, actually. And David and I had been out at the bars and stuff, and I texted Haywood and was like, "Can you come fly around and get us?" And he sent me a text back that said, do not insult me with your quotation marks." And then he came around, and he was wearing this terrible like blanket cloak thing that he'd wear around the apartment. And he wrapped us in it, flew us home, and he said, "I've been doing it all along, you know. You guys just, your disbelief prevented you from seeing my flying." But then he also just, while wrapped in the blanket, he was just farting as much as possible. And he said, "Welcome to my incubator." It was not the last time he said that.
Once you realize that you couldn't see him fly is when you saw Haywood fly. And once you could smell his flight going through your nostrils and into your cerebellum, that's when you knew you had been lifted off the ground and transported into your home or wherever, like where we live.
Wherever he was taken.
Wherever you were taken, yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes it was Jewel-Osco. Other times it was CVS. Different places.
This part, so we don't have any photos. He was like, would never sit still for a photo. So we just have a bunch of drawings today. I'm sorry.
Well, one thing I would like to make very clear, because everyone here knows Haywood. I think some of you have forgotten Haywood. And partly it's because
that's by design, by the way.
No photos.
He didn't want to be remembered.
That's right. But I'm every day for the past year that Haywood's been missing, or maybe it's been 6 months, I don't remember. But for every day since then, I've been forgetting him loosely and loosely. I've been trying to recreate him through visual aids, through writing aids. Can you call them brain word aids? Through
art therapy.
Through art therapy. I once, out of broccoli, made a sculpture of what I think Haywood looks like.
He liked broccoli.
He loved broccoli.
So this right here is a picture of him holding an apple, and he was trying to summon some of his magic. Like I said, he could fly, and he had magic, but it was like why or when he could do what made no sense. And anytime I'd try to ask him, like, "Oh, hey, like, what's the economy of your magic? Like, when can you do it?" And he would always just shush me and say, like, "You're disrupting the subjective balance of the universe." And I was like, "All right, I won't ask you again." But this is him he's trying to turn the apple into his favorite food, which is a squash.
This is what magic looks like. And these symbols here. Some of you may have seen this before, but this is what magic looks like. If you ever gone to Whole Foods on a Saturday morning and you're just walking through and you happen to go past the cheese aisle and there's a wine aisle over here, and over here is like some vegan like fish sticks or something, and then usually there's like a lady over here with a fold out table and she has like some juice and she gives you a sample and you're like, "This is free? This is for me. Usually, if you look very closely, you'll see these things floating around. And that's...
See one floating behind you right there.
What's the color?
I'm about to do something magical before this.
But he loves squashes. He always said that, people told him, this is not particularly a picture where you can see it, but people always said, your head looks like squash, Haywood. And so he liked to eat them and say brains for dinner again. And he said it really added to the atmosphere of the incubator as well, eating a lot of squashes. He made it, the incubator is usually his bedroom. He had a password to get in the bedroom, but you couldn't really ever guess the password. And usually it was a dance anyway. And if you didn't, you had to dance. If you didn't dance well enough, he wouldn't let you in. He would just say you have to dig deeper than that. You have to dance harder, or I'm not letting you in my bedroom.
Even incredibly well dancers couldn't get into his bedroom. People he brought over, hoping they would be able to get into his bedroom, wouldn't make it through. The farthest it would go.
He would say that it lacked imagination.
Often.
As for his, where he comes from and stuff like that, we don't know much.
I don't know really anything about him.
What was the gesture he would always do when we tried to ask him?
I'll get you the gesture and a story. So, before I get to the story, I would like to start the story off with a memory that I hope debunks everything John just said. Or as Haywood would call John, just simply Jay. So, everything Jay just said, pretty good description of Haywood, but Haywood was really my best friend. And maybe, if I dare say so, and I hope I don't insult anyone in this room by saying this, I think we had something a little bit more special than just simply friendship. But anyway, so when I was on the train up here, coming to this event to talk about Haywood, to remind people about Haywood, to talk about how he's missing, to show you some visual aids that we've constructed, but Haywood may or may not have looked like. I saw this woman on the train, and she had the most beautiful piercing on her nose. Is there a name for that?
That's Haywood on the train, just.
That is Haywood on the train. Something he loved doing, as you can tell from this photograph. It's not really a photograph anymore. But anyway, so I saw this woman with a piercing in her nose, and I was on the train. I was texting someone, I was distracted by her, and I said, man, I don't normally do this, but I have to let you know, you have the most beautiful piercing I've ever seen. And she said, what piercing? And I said, your nose piercing. And then right after I said, I realized that was a mole and not a piercing. And I remembered something that Haywood would normally, whoa, what was that? I remember something that Haywood would normally tell me not to do. And it was, don't talk to strangers, David. He said, David, every time you talk to strangers, you embarrass yourself. You usually don't know what you're talking about. You usually think like 3 weeks after you've said whatever you've said. Those were things that Haywood would say to me. And I'm really surprised I'm talking to most of you here tonight. But I want most of you to remember Haywood because he was a special person. And what was I getting back to again?
The gesture he would do, we tried to ask him.
The gesture and his past. So often, late at night, usually he would not let me talk to him. He would let me follow him. He would let me put his shoes on his feet. He would let me put jackets around him. Sometimes after he slept with a woman or a man, or other creatures, he would let me hold him late at night because he didn't believe in intimacy, but he didn't feel like I was intimacy.
Before we get too off track, by slept with, we'll get to what that means in a second.
It's a very different concept for Haywood.
But the gesture.
So usually early in the morning, he would wake John and I up, or Jay as Haywood would call him. He would wake us both up, lure us into the kitchen with sweet poetry that he would write for us just for that evening, and he would talk about his night. But it was very vague, it was very abstract, and then he would go to bed. And then later on, sometimes if there was a friend over, they would come out and talk to us, and they would be the ones that would tell us more about Haywood. So everything we know about him, for the most part, usually comes from the people he slept with, from others. people much like yourselves, and that's one of the reasons we called you here tonight. But anyway, so when I did approach Haywood later on, when I would say, so Samantha or Julian told me something about your history last night. I heard your parents are from New Zealand. He would, D. He would call me D, by the way. D, don't talk about mom and dad. Don't you ever bring up mom and dad. And usually I would stop. So, and usually after like a month or two of the, I would just stop asking questions, and he didn't have to tell me to shut up anymore. And that goes back to him telling me to shut up. Which I would do for most of this talk, actually.
He had these lovers, and his walls were very thin, so we could always hear what was going on in there, but it was never sexual. And he relayed to us once that he doesn't have sex. And he said that we wouldn't either if we could get women to laugh to the degree that he can. And he would laugh at us, and just because the girls were really laughing in there, let me tell you. But I don't even know if he even touched a girl ever. And there was only one who really came around more than once. Malicious Melissa. She seemed fairly like middle of the road, fairly ordinary. But he really was wrecked after she would be around. She had a weird sort of pull on him. We never saw her feet. And I think he never saw her feet either. And I don't know how she pulled that off. But that might have been honestly why he was so in there, because the feet thing, to be honest. But you can see the gap in his teeth here. That was he went to the dentist one day to get a tooth removed, and he said that ugliness is the true handsomeness. And so he was always kind of like flaunting that around the gap tooth thing.
He would flaunt it. He would smile, usually for no reason at all, just to show people that he was missing. Well, he wasn't missing a tooth, but that he had a space there.
You mentioned that poetry too. He would write his poems, and like one of his other like tricks, and I don't even know if this is magic. I think you would buy this stuff, but it was disappearing ink. He was really under the impression that I was like a very gamey person, a very pranky sort of person, and he would always like game me and prank me, and so he would write us these terrific poems in the morning and stuff. But once I read one, and he was watching me. I didn't know he was watching me. He was like through like a crack in the door or something, and he could watch the emotions taking me over as I just read these very nice things that he said to me. But then it all just disappeared. He saw my face kind of go gaunt, and he just burst out the door and started laughing at me. And he said, "Love is fleeting. Now you know that." So he was always trying to like teach me lessons with magic. And there was that day when he tripwired my door frame. So I didn't know I didn't know. And I fell, but I actually fell into like all these pillows, and then he gave me a really nice breakfast. And he said, I couldn't give you a nice breakfast without gaming you first, Jay. He was always like, "I got you," and I was never really trying to get him back. But,
no, he thought you were though.
He really thought that I was always planning like the big con or something.
Anytime Jay bought Haywood a beer, he wouldn't drink it. Because he thought that there was something up his sleeve when there probably wasn't at all. Although I'm suspicious of it. I mean, you have definitely the motive.
I wouldn't say if it was.
I mean, I wouldn't. I mean, I'm going to admit it now that he's gone. But I often would tell him that you probably are out to get him. There's no reason you wouldn't
believe this.
Well, we have a pretty close relationship.
Right. Yeah. Me and him the gaminess always kind of came between us.
I would show you the poetry he wrote for me, but it's gone. Just like Haywood.
It just disappeared, yeah.
But I'm sure if you saw it, you would agree that it was better than anything he wrote.
His vocation, he was just sort of, almost like a sort of like recreational white-collar criminal at times. Like there was this company he helped found and was a major investor in it looked like one of those Salvation Army donations in the parking lots where you put in the clothes and then, you know, poor kids get them or whatever. But this was like that. But then he would turn around and sell the clothes to India.
Or China.
Yeah. And so that was a big part of his money stream for a while. He was a cereal box designer.
He was a cereal box designer for a while. In fact, the last memory I have of him working was as a cereal box designer, specifically for the cereal. I think it was a kid cereal called Kitten Crunch. Has anyone heard of that? No, you'll see it soon, if you haven't heard of it. But just remember, Haywood designed that.
This is vintage. This is just fucking vintage Haywood right here.
This is how he was when we first met him.
Yeah, that's what he looked like on the day we met him.
This was the Intertown pub.
About that was an Intertown pub. Actually, you can probably recognize that.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely has all the food in it.
Right. But so about the whole like clothes scam, that was like some of the stuff we found out about his family and his parents. They traveled all over the place, like, and because of his like shape shifting, he would look different. Like there was this whole like he was just geometric for a while, and he would make fun of us and call us non-polygons for like the whole time, and so that was weird.
That was weird. One of the weirdest parts of this is before this geometric phase that Haywood was, I don't know, experimenting in. He used to tuck us into bed at night by stretching his arms from his bedroom into ours and tucking us in gently. But during the geometric phase, that tucking in felt almost like he was stabbing us with his pointy, as you can tell, pointy fingers and limbs here. It was just very clunky. It wasn't attractive. This was probably the worst I had seen him. He was eating a lot of eggs at the time. I mean, he was in bad shape, but he thought he looked really good. And some of you maybe remember him in this phase of life.
Because of the shape-shifting, we didn't know, like, had no clues, like, his ethnicity or, like, where he's from or anything. And, like, what we found out through his lovers was that he traveled around with his family, he hated his parents, and because they were just real sort of swindlers. They had, I think, first of all, like, obviously, the whole thing with the clothes donation, that was just like, come on.
It was a total
apple didn't fall far from the tree with that one. Because they had a thing where they would go into Korea and they would have this thing called America Camp. And you had to like trade your money for like Uncle Sam bucks, which they were like these cartoony versions of American dollars. And then you would buy things with those. But you just went to this big tent and you would like pay like a lot of money to like pretend you were like hitting a home run or like kicking a field goal or like eating a really big burger. You wouldn't actually eat the burger. You just pretended to eat it. And they would just like, they like really would sell the idea of America to people. And they were very convincing in it.
And oddly enough, most of this stuff was done in New Mexico and Nevada. Surprisingly. None of it was really overseas.
Yeah. Well, it was in Korea first.
It was in Korea first.
They eventually found out that in Nevada there was actually a richer market for it than anywhere.
There was.
Yeah.
It was in I forget the country's name. It's the one with all the people. They feel good all the time. You guys know anyway. I think you guys know what I mean. But it was in that country for a while too. No, it's one of the upper.
It's one of the
upper countries. It's one of the other ones. Yeah.
It's so we never really quite understood what his parents did or anything like that, which sucked. But he was very cynical because of his upbringing, and he said about his parents. He was like, it wasn't even. This is like, I think basically a quote. I don't know if he said these words exactly, but he was like, it wasn't the sinning that bothered me so much as the joylessness in the sinning. Because his parents, I don't think they even enjoyed their swindling. This is what it sounded like.
I mean, I have no idea.
Yeah, I never met them.
I never met them.
Yeah. Don't even know if they're alive.
Sometimes I don't even know if I really met Haywood. I mean, definitely I met an avatar pretending to be Haywood. But I don't know. I mean, all those long nights that we had, I don't know if they were real or just something I wanted to. I'm digressing. Let's go back to.
We have some important. I mean, I don't want to miss anything on our notes here. Yeah.
So this here is a more recent
the
drawing
hair.
of Haywood.
That's the hair.
And this is what his hair, I think, looked like. It was most people, I think, would say it was described like an open book. Literally. It was as though someone had opened a book.
His hair was like the.
And you could flip the pages through, yeah.
And his hair blow around a lot. It was like, when it was not windy, you'd think there was wind because of how much his hair was moving. And he would say, God is turning my pages again.
Oh.
This was,
yeah, that was when he was going to do some art. When he went to his art phase.
you could tell, because this was his favorite pen right here.
Oh, remember how, so he would always insist that Planet of the Apes was a documentary?
He did think it was a documentary. Only the first one, though. He
And
thought the rest were just
he would just keep saying,
reenactments.
damn dirty apes.
Damn dirty
And he
apes.
was, and there was anytime a girl would be coming over, he'd be like, I want this place spick and span, and the damn dirty apes coming over. Yeah, remember, so he always had a very throwback sense of media, too.
Right. His favorite TV shows were Perfect Strangers,
Northern Exposure.
Northern Exposure,
The Critic.
The Critic.
I don't know if you guys remember that one.
Do you guys remember The Critic? Everyone here remembers.
But he would talk about
With Jay
them
Sherman.
the way that, we talk about, like, Game of Thrones or Mad Men or something.
Right.
And it was as if, like, he's like, did you see the newest episode? And I was like, well, I mean, it stopped doing that one a while ago. And he was, you can't deny me my vacuum of time.
He was pretty into that. He was also really into ink spots that would float around him for no reason.
You remember his mystery cuisine phases?
I don't remember that.
That
Like
was
I said at the start of this,
eat stuff, and like he made it impossible for us to figure out what it. He like de-smelled it, he de-visualized it, and we would just sit there like guessing, like was it a pot roast, or like is that a brownie, or like is that minestrone? And he would just be laughing at us as we were trying to guess what it was.
based on what you described, that might be why I don't remember much of that.
Yeah.
But it's been like 3 weeks since he's disappeared or something. And I don't remember clearly very well some of these details, but I know for sure that he was one of my best friends. If not, did I say earlier he was my best friend? I think he was my bestest friend in the whole world. And I don't want to forget him, so we need to find him soon. And I know some of you are losing your memories of him as well. So I want to read you a couple quotes.
He sent us these letters recently. They had no return address or anything, but David's was long. Mine was just said, "Ha, got you. There's nothing substantive in here."
So what I have is a couple letters. One of them I found a couple years ago. This was a crumpled up piece of tissue in one of my boots, and this is what he wrote. I've added a few notes to this myself that I totally forgot that I've added. But I'm going to read those too as though Haywood wrote them. So Haywood, he didn't obviously write that. I wrote that to remember that this was someone named Haywood. Haywood once, in 2012, just before a hot air balloon in Carterton, New Zealand crashed and killed 11 people. You know, I just remembered something. I think his family was from New Zealand.
You think so?
I think so. But anyway, so as I just said, there was a crumpled up sheet of paper found in my boot, and in it, it said this. But before I tell you what it said, not only was there a crumpled up sheet of paper, but he also left me one of my favorite candy bars. It was one of those Ritter Sport marzipan bars with cacao covered all over the marzipan. I just love a good bite of cacao. So anyway, so he left this in my boot. And by the way, I'm vegan, so I don't wear leather boots. So if you're picturing a leather boot, don't. It was kind of a suede leather, similar to this. This is kind of denim, so it didn't really look like this, but it was similar in the fact that it wasn't leather, and it came up to here. Anyway, let me just go with this letter. So Haywood, who we mentioned, was a serial designer. I think that's significant to this, even though it won't make much sense now. But later on, maybe a week from here, when you're sitting on the toilet thinking about this discussion, it'll all become very clear. He wrote this. So, he wanted me to read this in case he ever went missing. And he writes, describe me as the following. Haywood, a cereal box designer, at least, I'm just going to skip that first part. So anyway, he traveled twice a week from his apartment, where he lives with John and me. He often lives to visit his lovers. However, there was one that has left a stain on the white fluffy carpet of his brain. Malicious Melissa. The two met at a dance, or at least this is what I'm led to believe it was a dance. I don't really know for sure, because most of the things Haywood said were sort of abstractions.
Dance a lot to summarize anything.
Anything was a dance. If he ate, he's like, I just had a terrific dance just a moment ago.
I just danced with the squash again.
Whenever he masturbated, which was very rare because he was almost asexual, he would call it dancing. Like, he'd say, D, I just danced all over your room. And usually that would go into to a nice surprise. But anyway, so he writes, the two most, if not all of his best poetry was related to Melissa. She was a medium-willed woman, whereas Haywood was a fickle soul. Their differences in relationships probably were the cause of their falling out of each other, even though they truly loved each other. This conversation was often talked about during our 2 a.m. snacks, the snacks of a drinking problem. Once there was an older lady named Endolyn. She had a foot made of glass and a lukewarm personality that closely matched Haywood's temperament. Ultimately, the three of us would have discussions, but never on anything truthful nor insightful. However, individually and collectively, we had to decide, should our philosophies be told, as Haywood would say, through the vitalization of the furniture we buy, swirled with the aroma of the people we mate with. And once again, I'm not incredibly sure what he meant by this letter, because much of what he said didn't mean anything to the way the words should mean to most people. If that makes sense. And by what I'm saying is that most of the words that Haywood used, he would come up with different meanings for, but he wouldn't tell anyone. So most of Haywood's life was like an inside joke that only Haywood knew. At least that's how I interpret him, because he never really told us anything.
That's a great way of putting it, actually.
Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah, am I smart for saying something like that? I think if Haywood were here, he would applaud, and he would say D.
Right. If I were to write a book about Haywood, that would be the epigraphic.
He wouldn't tell you anything like that, though. He would.
Oh no.
He would have probably took out the screws of that chair so you could fall down, because
He would have gamed
he would have gamed you.
Hey, do you guys have any questions about Haywood? What's the question?
Did I ever sleep with Haywood?
You met him.
You
don't
slept
remember?
with him.
I don't know, man. He was around. Like, I swear, like everybody says, like, who is he? But we're just like, I mean, you guys met him, but just like, you know, like it took us a while to like sort of like see him, you know. But then like the flying thing was another step. But I feel like seeing him fly for us is like seeing him at all for most people.
I think that's when most people fell in love with him.
Yeah.
He would fly often at the gym, which, to answer your question, yes, you did sleep with Haywood.
Barney slept with Haywood?
And you slept with him on a croissant, if I remember correctly. And I know that because you told me, Haywood would make people, he was a normal sized croissant. And it was lightly toasted because it was a day old. But it was very warm when you guys slept on it together.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Any more questions, Ken?
Going
very early in your discussion of the magic dots and how
dots.
Well, I'm wondering how those get categorized or named as magic, because it sounds like the things that you're talking about, the processes, the flying, the fruit, transmogrification, those sounded like very biological processes. So I'm just wondering how magic got applied to them. If Haywood would
You
treat
know,
those as
so the
magic.
thing is, all my education is in English, so fucking everything is magic to me, man. You know, somebody tried to explain gravity to me once, and I was like, that just sounds like a spell. So, I don't know. I thought it was magic. Other people said that he was just like holding a sparkler, but I don't know.
I don't know the definition of magic to answer that question.
Yeah, they didn't teach me that in my MFA program. Go ahead, Brian.
So, I mean, I know you guys are probably really aware that he would definitely listen to that CD that I bought him that one time. I'm sure you guys listen to it all the time.
Oh, he was
sorry
talking about it.
I'm
We
actually
talked
really
about that
sorry
one for
about
sure.
that.
And Haywood was not much of a music guy.
No, I know. So that's why he's like the only CD he had. It's terrible,
it was,
sure.
actually.
But do you know if he ever read the book that I gave him? I mean, it was
Oh,
really
Haywood
personal.
wasn't-
There was a, you know,
Haywood
I read
wasn't
something
much of a
that we
reader.
gave
He wasn't a reader.
See, look at this one.
He would sometimes put, he wasn't a reader, and I'm gonna quote sort of someone in the literature wrote on this. He was a kind of a snobby illiterate. He would hold up a book and be like, "Read this for me." I can't read.
I want you to read this for me already. Yeah, and we were like,
Which was surprising because he could write beautiful. He wrote. I mean, almost everything they were reading here was beautifully written by Haywood. In fact, I have one of his last letters that he left me. This is a bit out of context, and I don't remember the context fully, but I'll just read it anyway from where it starts. Dear D. And this is one of his old bank statements. But anyway, so Dear D, it costs the same amount as a poetic basket of Munster cheese, and most societal organisms get off by it. Like I said, I don't remember the context of this, but I do know that that this was important somehow to both of us. This is in response to your question last Thursday. Also, I used the words by, and the word by should really mean in the same way that I always do. And by the way, I should say something that when Haywood used the word by, it was sort of defined by this. So the way that Haywood meant it was by meant the relic of manhood. Along with that, manhood is an old anthropologic sort of, or anthropomorphic primate that imitates sort of like primitive gestures of manhood or something. And that the male identity was sitting by the side of God. And that's going to Nietzsche's version of God, which is God is dead. So therefore manhood is really dead.
Don't get me started.
And
on
so,
Haywood and
I mean,
Nietzsche.
that's Haywood and Nietzsche. Anyway, so Haywood ends off this letter with a double homicide, Deuce is wild, and the rest is incoherent. But I hope that answered your question about the book. But
honestly, dude, I don't think he read it.
He probably didn't read it.
Ted, I saw that your hand was in the air.
I was going to ask what, when we caught a couple glimpses of what he was usually wearing, but did he have any kind of fashion statement?
He had this one striped shirt that when he always announced that he was wearing it. He said, "I'm wearing the striped shirt again." But and he wore, like I said, he had that terrible blanket cloak thing that he would Dutch oven us in when he flew us home. But otherwise, nothing particular. He would wear long johns around the apartment.
What kind of kicks would he sport?
Oh, gosh, boots. But he didn't leave the apartment a ton, so just usually socks and long johns and that terrible
Socks
thing.
and sandals.
Yeah.
Socks and plastic flip-flops. Yeah, he has a variety of shoes. I mean, as you can see here perfectly, I think we captured it.
He was
Style
in
pretty
the
well.
shower. I can say that much.
Although Malicious M, you can't see her feet. Yeah. Not in this picture.
Okay.
And this isn't our house. This isn't where we live.
No, this is not a picture taken in our old apartment. This one was though. Are there any more questions about our old? I mean, first, if you have any idea, like we're curious. I mean, we're not like we're like, oh my god, like did somebody kidnap him? Like, no, we think he doesn't want to be found. But if you have a good lead, like very curious.
Go ahead.
I think I saw him at Jewel Osco.
At Jewel Osco, was he buying stamps or was he buying
He
candy?
was giving out juice samples.
He was giving out juice samples.
True.
That makes a lot of sense, actually.
Well, I'm be there tomorrow.
You know, I think I'll look into Jewel Osco juice samples. I'm gonna look into that. Maybe both of us will. Maybe we'll tag team this. We'll sort of do the sort of.
Guys, keep your eyes peeled for him.
Keep your eyes peeled for. Something. So for the rest of you, keep this in mind. We have a couple more letters. This was the last thing I found on our kitchen table. It's been maybe like a day or two since he's disappeared, and I just want to like read this last letter I found from him. And what makes me like feel really bad about this is there's no follow-up, and this was never mailed.
So he didn't intend for you to read it either.
And he didn't intend for anyone to read this.
I honestly feel like he'd be a little embarrassed, but
actually he did intend for one person to read this. Anyway, and that was the mayor.
That's true.
And it says,
but not us.
Not us. So it says, Dear Mayor, and if the mayor cannot help with this issue, please forward this to the appropriate individual or committee. There is a problem in our society, and I feel it is exclusively regional, if not local. I often see and hear people getting sick, and my theory is that it is because of insects, all of them. Especially this is true near the river and lake, which is a huge orgy for our city's insects. Though the entire U.S. and possibly world is trifled by this issue, I believe there is or are things that you as the mayor can do to protect us from this awful problem. Allow me to elaborate. I often see kids in my alley who are getting richly sick with disease. I notice several of these children to have issues with their stomachs. They have heavy fevers and wildly disgusting coughs. And something that I really wonder is, how does Haywood know that they had fevers? But anyways, maybe we could discuss that later over some grape juice and ginger. Where was I? So obviously they are causing a great illness, these insects. Thus, with the lake and river drained, people will be able to go without getting sick. Yes, I'm suggesting you drain Lake Michigan and all of those other extensions of water. I have investigated this problem to find out why people are becoming ill, and it turns out that this problem goes back to the first settlers. I have read several accounts of people in the area becoming sick. Usually this is written in passing, but it is a rather large phenomenon that has yet to vanish. My hypothesis is that if you gather a crew of dedicated workers and supporters, we can section off both the river and the lake and drain it. People will get better because all the insects will leave. They will leave, for there is no place for them there. Of course, this is only for a few insects. What we really need to do is place pesticides and insecticides in commercial airplanes and release them well above the city limits. Perhaps a chemical in the trail left behind by a plane would be best. It has to be a very strong insecticide. I'd also suggest sending out a team of special operatives to rid the city of anything that carries disease, such as undomesticated squirrels, rats, mice, pigeons, robins, sparrows, and some of the more distressed homeless people. I propose relocation. After all, I am an animal lover, but whatever you decide, I am sure will suffice. Then he goes on to say, I'd also recommend releasing more coyotes into the city to bring down some of our vermin issues. This, my dearest mayor, will decrease our illness issues. I have ran a similar test myself by shutting off the water in my apartment, and my two housemates, D and J, though upset about their lack of ritualistic showers, have not shown any signs of illness. I think this is because there are no insects in our apartment. I have also burned our food and bed so that insects do not have anything to eat nor breed in. Currently, I am attempting to do this to all the tenants in the building I live with. I shall report those findings on a later date. But imagine, if this works on such a small scale, how might it affect the larger scale? It will be brilliant. It was fun running my own experiments, but now it is time for someone like you, Mayor, insert name here, to do something good for our city, insert name here. Dedicatedly yours, H. And so, this letter was never sent to the mayor, and I wonder now if, like reading this last part, I wonder if he knew what city he was going to be in, because that might be a clue for us. But anyway, if you have any ideas where he might be, you guys said Julasco, but there's at least 2 in this city that I know of. So he could be either one of those 2. And
I think
maybe
there's
more.
like 4 of them.
Is there 4? I think you're thinking
Yeah.
Peoria.
Oh, Peoria, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, send us an email. Thank you guys for hearing us out about our old friend. We'll do our best to keep memory.
Yeah. Remember that face if you see that on the street or train.
This is
All right.
before
Thanks, guys. We're done.
Yeah, you're right. He has changed a bit.